so I'm going to kind of give a sample tour, a whirlwind tour through how I greet some of the vocational calling that brings me alive in the world and what it looks like. I'm going to start by sharing a little bit about my role at the Urban Permaculture Institute. Then I'll touch on a little bit, just a little bit, same image for a drawdown, and then talk about a lift economy. And we can talk capital formation if people are really interested in that. But let's start with the Urban Permaculture Institute, because permaculture as a design system for meeting human needs abundantly without taking away from the environment that surrounds us and within which we live, but actually meeting our needs in ways that heal, restore, and regenerate the very systems that surround us. This design system, it informs all of my work. But sometimes I get the privilege of actually working in a system that's been disturbed from soil erosion and dog walkers. This is a vacant lot that you can find today at the corner of, in Potrero Hill, the corner of 18th and Rhode Island. It's 5,000 square feet. When the owner of this lot greeted me in 2008, he said, "What can you do with this if you use permaculture design?" And so I got together a group of students, and I teach permaculture design through the Institute, and we came up with a conceptual design. And down the street, there's a Whole Foods that goes through 6,000 pounds of cardboard a day. So we took 13,000 pounds of it and covered the, there's no topsoil, it had all been eroded off this site. And then we took some landscape waste. We took about 30 tons of that and added it on top of the cardboard over the course of a few weeks in the fall, and then we planted in some nitrogen fixing, a mosaic of interspecies pioneers that started changing the character of this waste wood substrate. Right? And within a couple of months, it started to turn into something that I would call more alive, more beautiful, more green. And within the first year, we produced 2,000 pounds of food out of trash, and we spent about $340 to do it. And so there's no, go ahead, just, and this is what it looked like, and then this is what it looks like, but soon. And you can go check it out today. There's about 50 fruit trees up there. And I wanted to just highlight that for a moment, just to make sure that you know something that I know intimately. I have the privilege of knowing is that ecosystem, like my teacher Penny says, ecosystem restoration is trivial, it's simple. We know what we need to do. We have all the solutions. It's not decidedly uncommon news, but we know what we need to do. Ecosystem restoration or ecosystem restoration is more challenging. Some of the other work we do at the Urban Permaculture Institute is actually working with my partner Pandora Thomas. We do community-driven climate adaptation planning in oppressed and marginalized communities around the Bay that are at the forefront of extreme storm events and sea level rise. And actually getting people together in their community to make people's plans, like in Marin City and East Palo Alto, of green infrastructure and solutions that sequester carbon, provide for biodiversity and food security. It's just amazing to see what happens to a community that can come alive around these ideas. We all have the skill and the knowledge. It's all innate in our community. It's just latent. We've forgotten. And so remembering ourselves as nature really informs my work. Keep going. Drawdown. So, but turning to a different discipline with the human infatuation for quantification and numbers, Amanda, I was super honored. Amanda invited me to participate in this project where it was an honor to work with an amazing group of people from around the world measuring, mapping, and modeling the solutions to global warming, and with this, something that we didn't anticipate, to actually see what was possible. And we published a book in April of 2017. Exactly 2 years ago. And so, and it's still influencing policymakers, global investment community, and we're still working. I had a drawdown call right before I came here with somebody in Iran, and we're working on all these various solutions. And the answer that should be self-evident is there is no silver bullet. There's a lot of everything needs to happen, but we know what needs to happen. And yet there's a lot of room for innovation and technology for what you might be into in adding to this picture. But I wanted to turn to lift economy because Michael asked me to talk a little bit about capital formation and some of the work we do in this worker-owned cooperative consultancy that we call Lift. And one of the things we do is field building, and we look at different aspects of our economy that are dysfunctional and trending towards exploitation of people and exploitation of earth. And we look at the different pieces that are disconnected and we're people working on the solutions. And some of the solutions examples around building resilient communities is, did you know that we can build homes out of cellulose and wood and natural materials that are farmed and harvested in ways that sequester carbon and enhance biodiversity, and the homes can be plastered with earth and actually be resistant to fire and extreme storm events, especially if they're surrounded by green infrastructure that holds hydrology and water and humidity in the landscape, and we can have food security in those landscapes as well. We can redesign those human settlements to have diversified renewable microgrids without long transmission lines that spark and set fires, and we can also change the ownership structure to be more equitable and permanently affordable and actually return land from private ownership to commons. These are big things, and you might think me Pollyannish if it weren't the case that over the last 2 years in California we lost 31,444 structures to fire, and tragically, I don't want to be too prescient, but we're going to lose more this year and probably for every year for the rest of our lives. And we're going to be learning to rebuild human settlements as humanity, which gives us this incredible opportunity, like a vacant lot in Potrero Hill, to actually transform the nature of our communities. But some of our work is connecting these. So in terms of capital formation, if you tried to fund any one of these, it's very difficult. But when we actually stack and link them together, we find that we can unlock different aspects of different asset classes in the capital stack to make some of this happen. And that's the work we're doing under building resilient communities, but we also do other field building around, for example, regenerative agriculture. It's another thing that we look at Lift Economy. We've started a group called the Regenerative Agriculture Investing Network, which represents about $17 billion of investment capital that we are moving into investing in different aspects of regenerative agriculture. And I'm going to share one quick story at the end about this. We also look at restorative ocean economies, looking at ways where we can actually create the conditions that we associate with conservation in our maritime environments, so biodiversity, carbon capture, all these things, while producing material, economic, human yields, which is a huge opportunity for restoration that is, again, latent and something that we're trying to motivate. So Lift is at the forefront of trying to put these things together in these fields, even if the fields are in the water. And we link our fields together in our work. Again, we've started something called the Force for Good Fund, which is a model of capital formation that I won't go into the details about unless somebody's curious. And we call this stuff the next economy when we link all these things together. But I want to tell one story, if I have time, of the next economy. And this is for the last few months, I've had the privilege of working with this woman, Winona LaDuke, the White Earth Nation in Minnesota. And Winona is taking on a very interesting problem because in the world of textiles, which is the second or $2 trillion industry globally, when you look at the natural fibers, most of it's plastic these days and petroleum-based, right? More than half of textiles is tragically toxic for us, but the stuff that is natural is based on cotton. Cotton has not only a terrific or terrible human legacy of exploitation in terms of human bondage, but it also is the second most water-using crop in the world. And that has tragic impacts. If you want to look at the greatest disaster of the 20th century, it's the loss of the fourth largest lake in the world, the Aral Sea, which was dammed for irrigating cotton fields. But cotton has another problem associated with it too. It uses more pesticides than any other crop in the world and still has a lot of exploitation in the supply chain of our clothing. But hemp grows like a weed. We're working with some farmers in Kentucky who introduced us to this idea because they were growing hemp on mountaintop removal site slag fields. It was the only thing that would grow. They got a license to grow commercial cannabis, or industrial cannabis. And if you can see from the image there, you separate these bast fibers from this woody core, which takes some mechanical engineering, some technology. And it's actually kind of tricky. And the technology of the early 20th century was about, because of prohibition and so forth, is where we left off. So the technology, if you wear a hemp garment today, it's actually processed through capital-intensive caustic chemistry, watershed destroying type of practices, but that doesn't have to be the case. And I need mechanical engineers, because what I'm working on with Winona is doing R&D on small scale, farmer friendly, decentralized infrastructure to create a locally self-reliant, resilient textile economy that's carbon sequestering, biodiversity enhancing, and antimicrobial by nature. And we can do it, we can even have this blend. And I just want to, I get geeky about like decortication and scutching and all the different process pieces of turning a plant into a garment. But if you actually combine wool with hemp, you get these amazing qualities. Most of the carbon footprint of clothing you wear is actually in the washing, the industrial washing and drying of clothing. And wool has a problem where you can't industrial wash and dry it, and hemp has a problem in that because of the irregular length bast fibers, it tends to be scratchy. If you combine or blend hemp with wool at about a 50-50 blend, you get something as soft as cotton that can be industrial washed, and it's naturally antimicrobial, so you might have a garment that you have to wash maybe a couple times a year at most. And so you also have sheep that get to graze the stubble from the cannabis fields, and they get really happy. So I'm here to tell you that we can make America graze again, and that's the opportunity in front of us. And I hope if we can expand our imaginations, you can picture yourself, however many years from now, with your entire wardrobe looking at your wardrobe and knowing that everything in there is actually contributing to solving global warming, enhancing the biodiversity of the planet, and regenerating the potential for more conditions conducive to life, and restoring watersheds and rural economic opportunity for indigenous communities or black, indigenous, person of color communities. That is all possible, and it's all happening, and we need your help. That's it.